Welcome back, students. I hope you guys are doing well today. This is part number 3 for our nation building lecture series for the 19th century building of nations in Europe. And today we're going to speak strictly about Germany and this guy right here, Otto von Bismarck. You've seen him on the PowerPoint intros for this lecture series. And he was just instrumental in the establishment of his power base in Prussia, and then his establishment of Germany being the power in Europe. And this is going to take place over time and under his leadership. But in the end, it started out with Germany being a collection of states, Germanic states in Central Europe, and they weren't very organized. They had their own kind of leadership and everything. And under Otto von Bismarck, coming out of basically 1871, you have Germany as a power base, and it's now an empire. And it's all because of Otto von Bismarck and his policies and his wars. So we'll be talking about that today. Okay, class, we're going to move into our third PowerPoint lecture on 19th century nation building, and today we're definitely going to be talking about Germany. Actually, on this title slide, you can see the man there on the right with the big mustache and the Pickelhaube helmet on. The Pickelhaube is the helmet with the spike. That is Otto von Bismarck. He was key in the formation of Germany. We're going to be looking at this today. So, under Otto von Bismarck, we have just an overview of who he is. He was known as the Iron Chancellor, one of the most famous statesmen in 19th century Europe. He was the driving force of German unification. He was a strong force in the balance of European powers between the Congress of Vienna and the end of the 19th century. And when I say that he was a strong force in the balance of European powers, in the end, Germany became the European power, so there was not much balance. 1862, because he was a wealthy landowner, he was appointed Prime Minister of Prussia by the Prussian king Wilhelm, or in German, Wilhelm I. Okay, there he is, like on the title slide. He was born in 1815 and he died in 1898. Continue with the overview of Otto von Bismarck. He was the master of Realpolitik, which I'll explain that coming up in some slides. He was unshakable in his convictions. When he became Prime Minister of Prussia, Prussia was a second-rate power overshadowed by Russia, Austria, France, and Britain. And Prussia was unstable, had democratic revolutionary tendencies in Prussia. Now, Prussia was kind of like a city-state, or it was larger than a city. It was like a state. It was called Prussia, a Germanic peoples. And it was basically on the verge of revolution itself. When Bismarck retired in 1890, Prussia was the dominant portion of the German Empire, and the German Empire was the strongest in Europe. And so, by the end of Bismarck's career, Prussia was at the top. Not only was it the strongest portion of Germany, it was the strongest portion of Germany, and Germany was the strongest in Europe. And this happened under Otto von Bismarck's leadership. Okay, so Realpolitik, you may have heard this term before, but this really is the reason that Germany, the Germanic states, were able to really come out on top at the end of the 19th century. Realpolitik is a system of politics and principles based on practical considerations rather than moral or ideological considerations. And what that means is basically decisions are made in the government and in the for the country that have practical results. instead of, let's say, moral, ideological, or philosophical results. That would be kind of like, think of the Enlightenment ideals, more of a philosophy kind of an idea where man can make decisions to have better social standings. And they would be pushing for societal ideals where man would have the vote, or where man could live equally, or have prosperity. That's not really the concern of Realpolitik. Realpolitik is a political system that wants to see results. And no matter how you can get it done, get it done. And this is basically what it is. So we have a list here on the screen. It is or has. It is goal-oriented. It has no fixed rules, so it's not really concerned about ethics. It's not really concerned about morals, this kind of a movement. They're not overly concerned about that sort of thing. They want to see things done, even if that means stepping on other people or putting other people down, then you do it, as long as it's for the betterment of the country. It was limited to practical realities, so it was not this kind of out there philosophical, let's talk about it and think about it and hope something comes about. No, it's this is what we're going to do because this is the result we see. It was vital in securing national interests. Again, if the country is on the verge of revolution, then they're not going to be thinking about national interests. They're going to be thinking about revolutionary ideas or revolutionary interests. And so it was vital in securing national interest. The idea of let's not offend anybody, that does not exist in Realpolitik. They'll offend whoever they want to offend as long as they can get what they want. Kind of lofty, pie-in-the-sky ideas have no place. I kind of mentioned that already. It's this kind of ambiguous. This is how society can be if we start doing some things, with philosophy. Having the right thinkers out there to be able to bring about social change through writings, and that didn't exist. Not with Realpolitik. Political philosophy over humanistic philosophy. So it was all about the government and pushing forward the political players that are on stage, and there's not thinking too much about the humanistic societal philosophy, especially of the Enlightenment. So Bismarck's Realpolitik application. He used it successfully to advance Prussia and to gain great dominance in Europe. So Bismarck, if you want to see an example of Realpolitik really working, look at Bismarck and how Germany became a country. He did not care about offending. He didn't care. He had absolutely no tact. He was a harsh politician. He was a military man, and he didn't care who he offended. He was not tactful in dealing with people. He was antagonistic. He believed that being antagonistic was the only way to get things done. And just for a proof of that, we're going to talk about these wars in a second, but in 6 years, from 1864 to 1870, he started 3 wars. And that was with Denmark, with Austria, and with France. And so he didn't care who he offended or who he antagonized, as long as he was able to push forward his political ideals. The goal was to make Germany a great empire with Prussia as its core. Again, remember, he was the Prime Minister of Prussia. He manipulated other European powers to attain dominance. He was instrumental in the German unification after the Congress of Vienna by rallying Germanic states and their leaders. And what did he rally them to? So after the Congress of Vienna, he really got the states to come together, number one, to reject Austrian interference. Number two, to go to war against other European nations. And number three, to consolidate into Germany's Protestant states against Catholic Austria. So these are the rallying points for Otto von Bismarck. Get rid of Austrian interference. We can go to battle against these other European nations in these three separate wars, and then to basically consolidate Germany's Protestantism, which is basically Lutheran, against Catholic Austria. He gained popularity by giving universal male suffrage. That's the right to vote. All men could vote. And he gave a very famous speech called the Blood and Iron speech. And the ending of his speech, or part of his speech, I should say, is the great question of the day will not be decided by speeches and resolutions of majorities, but by blood and iron. So he was not interested in all the talk. He wanted action, and that meant going to the war. He became the Iron Chancellor of Germany, and that was a nickname for him. But what he did, the way he did this was he built the first mechanized military. Now, I put in parentheses there, it's more like a pre-mechanized because they did not have, tanks or anything yet. This is still a lot of horses and just foot soldiers. But they conducted warfare, which is called blitzkrieg. And you may be familiar with this with the Second World War because that's the same thing that Hitler used. But blitzkrieg means lightning war. Blitz means lightning and Krieg means war. So it's lightning war. And it's an intense military campaign intended to bring swift victory. So that's basically what it means for that he was a mechanized military. He would, when they went to war, it was quick. It was quick and dirty. By 1871, Germany was established as the Second Reich and lasted until 1918. So, in 1871, Germany became a nation. That's the year that Germany actually became the German nation, or German Empire, they called it. Well, this was established under Otto von Bismarck as the Second Reich. In parentheses there, I put what this means. The First Reich was when the Germanic states were part of the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, that's the First Reich. The Second Reich is from 1871 to 1918. 1918, obviously, when Germany lost World War I. And then the Third Reich is from 1933 until 1945 under the Nazis. So this is the establishment of the Second Reich under Otto von Bismarck. And he reformed the military and generated German sentiment against enemies. So he reformed his military, so that's good for his military. But then he also got the Germanic people to basically hate their enemies, have sentiments against their enemies. And so if the people are against, let's say, the Austrians or the French, if the people are against them, that makes it a lot easier for the leaders, the government, Otto von Bismarck and his military, to go to war against them. So Bismarck's wars. He led Prussia into 3 wars that ended with the establishment of the German Empire. Now, when I say he led Prussia into these wars, Prussia was very powerful now, and the other Germanic states would join Prussia in going to war. Not all Germanic states did. Some Germanic states actually sided with Austria in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. But majority of the Germanic states sided with Prussia. So he led Prussia into 3 wars. All 3 led to a shattering of their enemies and strong Germanic national pride. So just me saying that in that sentence, even though there's a typo on the screen, let's just say all 3. Germany won all of these wars. So we have these 3 wars. We're going to talk about them briefly. The Second Schleswig War. So Schleswig, the W in German, it sounds like a V. Schleswig War of 1864. The Austro-Prussian War of 1866, and the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. So 3 wars in a very short time, and Germany won all of them. And notice these are 2 of these nations are pretty big, and these are powerful. Austria and France, these are pretty powerful now. When you start seeing France in 1870, they're kind of recovering now from their disastrous beginning of the 19th century. The Second Schleswig War of 1864 was a smaller war. German states against the Danish Kingdom, which is kind of to their north. The war lasted almost 9 months, so pretty fast. Again, that blitzkrieg idea. And the result was Denmark loses land, which were called duchies. Denmark loses land to the Prussians. So that's the first thing that Bismarck did. Went to the war, beat them fast, got some land. Things are looking pretty good for Bismarck and Germany. Here's just a picture I found on the internet of the Second Schleswig War. Okay, the next war is the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. Now, this war is also known as the 7 Weeks War because, you probably guessed it, it only lasted 7 weeks, and the Germans beat Austria. Now, this was the Prussians and their their states, Germanic states, versus Austria, but there were a couple big Germanic states that joined Austria on this one. The state of Hanover, Saxony, and Bavaria all joined Austria in the Austro-Prussian War. So you have the Prussians and other Germanic states against Austria and a couple of Germanic states. Really what happened, Prussia tricked Austria into war, which ended up showing Europe who is boss over Austria. And it was a simple kind of a trick. The trickery was over how the new lands from the Second Schleswig War would be administered. So remember, out of the Congress of Vienna, Austria had a great deal of influence over the governance of these Germanic states. And they were losing their influence over the Germanic states over time. And when Prussia gained these lands during the Second Schleswig War, they tricked Prussia into war, or they tricked Austria into war over how these new lands would be governed or administered. The most decisive battle of the Austro-Prussian War was the Battle of Königgrätz, and that's a pretty famous battle in Europe, the Battle of Königgrätz. The result, the Prussians win and Austria loses all influence over Germanic states. And the Germanic states really start talking about unification now into a country. They would not be a country yet. That's going to be in 1871. But Austria now has lost all their influence over all of those Germanic states. Just another picture, artistic rendition. So you see this. These are Prussians. This here is called the Pickelhaube. This helmet with a spike that becomes very famous in the First World War. You see the cannons here on their limbers. Okay, so just artistic rendition. And the last war that we're going to talk about is the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. This is between France and Prussia, and this lasted about 6 months. And so you see this lightning war, get in, beat the enemy, take control. This was Otto von Bismarck. I mean, that first war was 9 months. The second war was 7 weeks. This third war is now 6 months. I mean, just fast warfare. And again, it's not going against some small little country. This is going against France. So Prussia is really gaining power. France was concerned about the balance of power in Europe, and Bismarck frightened the Germanic states into joining Prussia over fear that France would invade the Germanic states. And so with France being concerned about the balance of power, Otto von Bismarck said, hey, France might invade us. Why don't we join together and invade them? So France basically went to war with Prussia. France wanted to use the war as an opportunity to regain some of their European standing after its disastrous first half of the 19th century. Unfortunately, France loses. Unfortunately for France, they lose. So they could not regain their status. Okay, so here's just another picture. There's the Franco-Prussian War. Treaty of Frankfurt of 1871 ended the Franco-Prussian War. And basically what came out of this is that Germany was now a European power. France must pay heavy war reparations, and that's a heavy financial payment for war damages. And the Treaty of Frankfurt of 1871 said that France had to pay 5 billion francs in gold. The next thing that came out of the Treaty of Frankfurt was German army would occupy Alsace-Lorraine. And this is a coal and iron ore region. Also has a lot of industry in it. And so Germany can now control this land. They now have the resources of coal and iron and the industry, which causes them to be more powerful, especially with their war machine. They can make weapons and they can have more industry, while France lost all of that, and then France's economy suffers even more because they've lost Alsace-Lorraine. And this leads to a strong anti-German sentiment in France, especially during the time that leads up to the First World War. This was not good. This was like the thorn in their side that Germany was occupying Alsace-Lorraine. So here's the Treaty of Frankfurt. Just a picture there. So we now have the German Empire, 1871 to 1918. Emperor Wilhelm I of the House of Hohenzollern. He becomes the emperor of the German Empire. He was a very popular emperor. He basically became the symbol of modern German identity. He was careful not to abuse his power, and he was a strong supporter of Bismarck. So Bismarck brought up all this nationalism, and the people became very loyal to Germany and fought these wars, and they were victorious, and they were very strong. And Wilhelm supported Bismarck in all of this. So he was a popular emperor. Bismarck was very popular. The people are very nationalistic and supportive of Germany. Germany is the most powerful country in Europe now, and they have this strong presence and definitely building a strong military that's going to lead up into the First World War. On January 18th, 1871, Wilhelm is crowned Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany in the Palace of Versailles. Okay, so there's Kaiser Wilhelm I. He is the emperor, the first emperor of Germany in 1871. And then this is Otto von Bismarck. This is a photograph of Otto von Bismarck on his deathbed in 1898. And so he got to live and see Germany really becoming a strong power in Europe. From 1871, when Germany was established as a nation, all the way up until his death. But obviously, because the First World War started in 1914, he obviously was not alive. But what he did was he established Germany during the 19th century that would set the stage for the First World War in the 20th century. Okay, class, that's going to be it for this session, for this session's PowerPoint. And we are now basically at the point of setting the stage. The stage has been set, I should say, of Europe getting ready for the First World War. What is going to happen is there's going to be some alliances made for defense and for protection with the different nations all around Europe. And basically, when one nation declares war, that starts a domino effect, and all these other nations start falling into the First World War. So we've really we did a good job for the 19th century establishing Europe. We saw Spain, we saw a little bit, we saw France a little bit. We definitely saw Italy and Germany, and so things are kind of falling into place here for us for the First World War. There will be a short time of peace before the First World War. Again, that doesn't start until 1914, but and it's not peace around the world. I mean, there are many other issues going on. For example, at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, Great Britain is just engulfed in a war in South Africa called the Boer War. It was the Second Boer War. They were fighting the Dutch in South Africa. The Dutch had created their own little. The Dutch were down there by South Africa. They kind of seceded and created their own two little states called the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, and they went to war with Great Britain. And Great Britain thought it would be a quick little war. We'll beat these Dutch farmers and what they were doing. And it ended up being for a couple of years, and a lot of soldiers had to go there and fight, where the British fought the Dutch in South Africa. So there's still things going on around the world, but it's kind of a relative peace, an unsteady peace during the beginning of the 20th century that would lead to the First World War. One thing I did want to mention is we have not been able to really cover the scramble for Africa. This is a colonial movement of the European nations based out of a Berlin Conference in the 1880s. And basically what they did was the nations got together in Berlin with a map of Africa and started carving up Africa and going and colonizing it. We're not going to have time to do a great study in that. I would love to do a great study in that because of the colonial movements of Great Britain, France, Portugal, and Germany, even Congo, the Belgian Congo, which is in the Belgians get in there and say they want the center part of Africa, the Belgian Congo. So there's a lot of different pieces, power players moving from Europe into Africa. And we're not going to be able to study that in any depth. So what I did was in Moodle, I put a link for a very short video just showing it's an animation of the map of Africa, and it's an animation over time every year, and you'll start, it goes kind of fast, and then when you get to the 1800s it gets faster, and you start seeing things popping up on the map, and then around the 1880s like almost all of Africa is colonized. So take a look at that video. Also, do not forget your paper for your research paper is due Friday, March 6th, 2020 by midnight. So that's coming up here at the end of this coming week. So you want to make sure that you have that emailed to me before midnight on Friday, so then I can begin grading them and getting them back to you as fast as I can. Other than that, no other issues or concerns. If you have any problems, just shoot me an email. Have a great day.